Mr. Roger, thanks for dropping by. Just looking at the way things change out here. You know, you get like a phase of most of the stuff in bloom is Cattleya sort of stuff, and then another time it'll be Oncidium type stuff, and then, I mean, this is Dendrobium time, you know, this sort of late spring into summer. But then some have already gone. Some have gone and been forgotten and are pushing new growths. But this one's still. Whoops! I'm treading on here. Oh. So I've been rearranging stuff. This one's still going to be out some time, but that's the sign of it. That's the first bloom to go over on this plant. And this was, I know this was the first spray to open because I had to twist it round to film it, basically. That was a long time ago, but I left it there. So this one's, you know, this one's going to be around a long time. Some of the buds, you know, opened a lot longer after that first spray, you know, literally a month or more later. And it's been open a long time. So this Jenkinsii, you'll remember me saying, oh, it's just opened and, you know, it's going. You know, another week, I suspect all these blooms are going to be gone. This may well not make it to everything in bloom on the 8th. And yet it hasn't been open long. You know, there's quite a few that just don't last long. The epidendrum is looking really good at the moment. It's yet to lose its first bloom. So these have been open some time, but it will carry on blooming a very long time. If you look at the top in the centre, you can see buds that haven't opened yet. Well, eventually it'll start a process whereby the lowest blooms die off and drop, but there's still buds forming at the top. So it makes for a very attractive show, this one, it really does. Lovely bright colours. See if I can get this to focus. There we go, that's got it. So I have realised that I do have to do this touch screen thing to actually, it gives it a central point which it then concentrates the software focus on. So it allows me to go in quite close. But they're lovely blooms. You know, there's a combination there. There's deep orange, other shades of orange, there's even a bit of yellow there. It's just a lovely combination of colours, that one. I do have to remember to cancel it though. But as far as Dendrobiums are concerned, the Lindleyi is, I was wobbling around because I've just brushed against it. But I like it when it does this. This spike here is the latest one to open. So you can have a bloom on that spike next to one that's been open longer. And you can see the difference in the colours. It's quite dramatic. You know, the lip central point on the left-hand bloom of that pair is green, or a greeny colour. And the one on the right is a distinct, well, I'd call it orange, with a nice yellow bloom, whereas this one's a pale yellow, sort of more a primrose yellow. So they change colour quite dramatically, and the depth of colour on the Jenkinsii as the blooms age is quite dramatic compared to when they first open. So both of those are quite good examples of colour changes. Whereas the Nesta, that doesn't change colour at all. But it won't be too long and the blooms will start to go on this. That seems odd, it hasn't been here long. And these top couple of buds up here have only just opened. So they'll be the last to go. But, you know, they just, this is the problem with a lot of Dendrobiums. Apart from the Latorias, they just don't last long. So you have to sort of put up with the fact that a lot of them are once a year and don't last long. And it's whether that justifies their existence, if you know what I mean. I may write an article for the newsletter based on what happened to my Jenkinsii this year, because it spent the winter in a different place. And it's had a dramatic effect on it because half of the plant has hardly bloomed at all, because it was in its own shadow, basically. Is that new growth? Yes, new growth right on the end there. It's the first one, I think. Oh no, I can see several. So it's just coming back into growth now, which always signals the end of the blooms. But yeah, the blooms are heavy up here, That should have been the concentration over virtually the whole plant. But this end didn't get the light, and this end did. And that sounds daft on one plant, but it was just where it was positioned, the light came in from one direction. And this end was in shadow. So we'll make sure we don't do that next year. But it does mean that I am quite certain now that it's not necessarily the low temperature in the winter. Yeah, because I went up 2 degrees this year to 15 from 13, so a bit warmer, you know, my minimum temperature, and that's to try and help those that don't like the cold. So I was wondering whether my Dendrobiums would bloom as well, and at first I thought, well, this one didn't, but in fact it was the light. Now I did that once with my Laelia anceps. Read in many places and discussed it, and you know, this is a much cooler grower, comes from a much higher altitude, so I put it down low. Actually put it down there where it got the cool air from the inlet fan. And what I hadn't appreciated was it lost its light down there, so it didn't bloom a whole year. 2 new growths matured, no blooms. Put it back on the top shelf, following year bloomed fine. So it's not always the temperature. Yeah, sometimes it's the light. And I think with the winter resting type Dendrobiums, it's not the amount of light, it's the change in light. So I'm quite happy to keep my winter resters during the growing season out of bright light, and then put them back into the bright light, if you can call it that in the UK, for their winter rest, so that the increase in light is noticeable to the plant. And this sort of represents the leaf fall on the trees, basically, you know, so where the brighter light would come through during those winter months, because a lot of these come from either deciduous or semi-deciduous forests. So, yeah, but they do change. Things change in grow spaces, greenhouses, and even in homes. You know, you get a period, like a lot of people will say, well, all my Phalaenopsis bloom through the winter time, brightens up the winter really good. And then somebody else will say, oh, that's strange, mine bloom in the summer into the autumn. Well, there are different types, and it depends what goes into the hybrids, where their season is. And some of them don't even seem to have a season. As fast as one spike starts to fade, another one grows. You know, so they're almost constantly in bloom. I haven't got any of those. But again, another Dendrobium. These blooms will last quite a while. And the other set of buds is pushing on now. I suspect that might only be one bud down there, but another one to come. So that will extend its life there. And again, canes on this one, slightly out of phase. The canes that came into bloom first matured earlier than the other two. Yeah, so these 2 canes, this cane got hit by a slug and lost some of its buds, but still managed 2. That may well push out some more buds next year in the other places farther down the cane. Same with this one. This has only bloomed on 3 joints, which means there's another 4 or 5 that didn't bloom this year. So those canes may well bloom again next year. Yeah, so different stuff. The I'm not going to get it down. Coriniferum, I think it's called. This is changing colour on the grounds that the orange in the centre of the lip is getting deeper the longer it's open. Another one's opened up there on the older part of the plant as well, just opening now. So you can see how pale the centre is when it opens, and then it deepens, and the markings become more apparent. I don't know if I can get this camera to... So the trouble is, there's a leaf in the way. So for me to touch the screen... Oh, let's get it in close, see if I can do it. Let's see if I can get right in there, and so that you can see the colours in the centre of that lip. Pretty stunning, but yeah, very pleased with that. And then I look round and I see, oh dear. So the zygo is starting, you know, that's the first bloom to go. That would have been the first one to open. And it'll, you know, these 2 on the end of this spike opened probably 10 days later than the first one. So there's at least 10 days worth left on that one. We hope. Yeah, we hope. This little Tulumnia has been open a ridiculous amount of time. It really has been open absolutely ages. Of course, now I've moved it, I'll never focus on it. You going to stay still for me? I doubt it. Well, we can try. See, this touching the screen still only works if the actual subject stays still. It keeps moving around, it still don't work. Oh, there we go. I think that's sharpened up there now. Lovely little blooms on there. And each individual, every bloom is individual because of the lower area has its own set of spots and markings that vary from bloom to hardly any to quite a lot of spots. So they all look slightly different. So, and this one's lasting quite well, the apple blossom. That seems to be lasting well. Again, attractive blooms. And a lot of the attractiveness here is the contrast in the colours. It's the fact that you've got delicate tinges of pink with yellow. Now those two colours don't normally go together. And that's before you look at the lip, where you've got a sort of much deeper purple and a very deep yellow in the centre. Hang on, get it to focus. There we go. Very, very attractive in the centre. And, you know, bonus there, it lasts a reasonable amount of time, and in addition to that, it's fragrant. And I think that's something I'm watching for from now on. It won't happen all the time, but because sometimes I'll just see a bloom and think, oh, I must have that, that's just gorgeous. But it's geared up to a plant that will grow in here, number one, hopefully, and two, it's easy to bloom. It's not going to be one of these awkward ones that needs precise conditions. And when it blooms, the blooms are attractive and reasonably long lasting. And there are a lot of orchids that are in that category, and there are a lot that aren't. So by being selective, you make your life easier. And we can all do with a bit of that now and again. Anyway, I didn't want to spend too long out here filming, and I don't want to, I mean, I shouldn't concentrate on blooms with everything in bloom on the 8th coming up, but that is 8 days away after all, isn't it? Or 9 days, whatever. Oh, and I've just noticed that our first Hercoglossum blooms have opened. Now these are not going to look anything special because I haven't got the light. These need a backlight, and I'm not going to be able to get this to focus, I don't expect, simply because if I touch the screen and then move the bloom, I wonder if that will work. It does. That's about as good. So I'm trying to look at the screen and see what I'm doing, and when I'm doing that I can't see what I'm doing. Does that make sense? Anyway, lovely. It's still one of my favourite Dendrobiums, but this will build up to a mass blooming probably in about 2 weeks' time. The blooms on this last about 12 days, I think, maybe 14. There's some more actually in bloom in there if you look through the gap. So it'll build up to a mass blooming, and then so it starts off with a trickle, just an odd one or two, and then it builds up, and then it tails off. So overall, I can expect this to be in bloom for a couple of months, which is good for what are relatively short-lived blooms. And now I'm going to shut up for a second so that you can listen. What's that strange sound on the roof? Surely it can't be. I think it is. Yes, it is. Look who's hurrying to come indoors. I doubt if you can see him through the shade netting. Yeah. You'll hear the clatter of the cat flap go now. He was out there in the sun, and now he's coming in because I do believe it's starting to rain. That amount of rain is going to do no good at all. We need this area here to do any good. It's going to need heavy rain on and off for a few days, not just 5 minutes. But it's raining, so well, there we go. So I'll have to stop filming now anyway, or we'll get deafened in a minute if it comes on hard. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by. Actually, let's do the close-up thing on this. Because these blooms are rather large, I don't normally bother. But let's bother. Let's get in nice and close on that. They are pretty good, aren't they? If I can find some more zygos in my travels, they will come home with me. But I obviously don't want to bring home one that's virtually identical to this, which was what was on offer at Burnham's, virtually identical. And that strange pale coloured one that doesn't do much for me, I must admit. I'm sure some people think it's wonderful, but doesn't do much for me. But now that I've grown a zygo and got it to bloom and got past the repotting catastrophes I normally get, we will keep our eye out for some more. And I will try and escape from Burnham's private area via I won't call it bullying, persuasive tactics, shall we call it. I'll see if I can get out with a couple of those zygo species from Sarah. Next time I'm down there, we'll see what we can do. Might be nice to have a zygo species, or two perhaps. We shall see. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by. What's up? Did you get wet? Did you get wet? You're not allowed out here, are you? Eh? Come on, you're not allowed out here. Come on, in you go. What's that then? No, you're not to come out here. Come on. Naughty cat. What's that noise then?